Much for making your way back after some bubble tea. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, let me know and I will do something about it. But yeah, there's coffee, tea as well, and lots of fruits in there. So just make your way back there wherever you need. After this panel, we've got a Ninja Challenge, which is an activity, so don't miss out on that one. But I just had a quick message as well about the after party. There's an after party right out there at the end of all these panels. And it's going to be fantastic, so don't miss out on that either. All right, so I think we've got a panel now called How to Optimize Legal Operations. And we've got a video, I believe, from our sponsor, Conga. So if we could just play that, please. It's a 2-minute video, so you might want to sit.
Conga CLM is an end-to-end contract lifecycle management solution built to automate highly complex contracting processes that can span geographies, multiple departments, and even address needs for both commercial and procurement contracts. It empowers everyone involved in the contracting process to increase their contract visibility and enforce compliance to mitigate risk. Thanks to its ease of administration, Conga CLM will move at the speed and future growth of your business. According to Tim Cummins, president of the World Commerce and Contracting, ineffective contract management costs businesses up to 9.2% of revenue. Our customers typically see a 45% increase in contract accuracy, 43% increase in compliance, and 42% faster contract processing, all creating positive outcomes for business revenue while doing more with less. Conga CLM gives the right people access to the contract process at the right time to expedite cycles. From requests to signatures, including amendments and renewals, Conga CLM's self-service and workflow automation guides users down the right path and automates routine steps. You can import third-party paper or use your own agreements. And upon import, Conga Contract Intelligence can use AI to detect and track fields and clauses from these documents. Once contracts are generated, users can stay in Microsoft Word for the entire negotiation process using Conga's X-Author plugin. Approved redlines can automatically sync back from Word to ensure the paper matches the record for accurate reporting. Each step of the process is monitored to maintain accuracy and compliance with a single source of truth.
Excellent, thank you so much. So let's welcome our speakers on stage, please, with a big round of applause. Excellent. So our moderator for today is Travis Hughes, who's a senior account executive for Conga. Our panelists are Cicely Silo, who's the general counsel for Bird-On Group, Elizabeth Flett, who's the general counsel and company secretary for Cancer Council New South Wales, Michael Gilday, who's the general counsel and head of property at the Sydney Fish Market, and Ryan Zarai, who's the head of legal at Eucalyptus. All right, Travis, over to you.
Hey guys, wow, packed room, there we go. So I think before we start, I just wanted to make a point that while all of us are from very different businesses, we actually we're looking to see everything through through the same lens, actually. Oops, I kind of butchered that. So we'll keep this interesting. It's the end of the day. It's the end of the day, so we might as well have some fun. So, you guys look great. So, just to frame up how this conversation is going to go, you know, optimizing legal operations is probably something that is semi-front of mind. But what I want to do is put a little bit of structure behind this conversation. So we're going to really start off with, I guess, how do we do more with what we currently have? We're going to kind of go through that. We'll go through the pre-steps and the necessary changes that you have to start making within the business before you start innovating. And then what does the future state look like for legal operations? And how do we, I guess, prepare ourselves as either general counsels or technologists to make that change? So with that, kind of kick off into the first section before we take our sunnies off. What do legal operations mean to you guys in your current roles? And I'll leave it for whoever wants to take it first. Ryan, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, I think, thanks for the question. Legal ops, I think there's no one definition that kind of fits all. As Travis mentioned, we, I guess, represent a cross-section, everyone, I guess, here on the panel, but also in the room from different organizations. And I think legal ops is going to have a materially different definition for each of us. At a fast-paced, extremely fast growth VC-backed healthcare, healthcare startup like Eucalyptus, operations means ensuring that the legal team can keep up with the demands of the rest of the business. And that might mean, as something I've had to communicate quite recently, communicating to the business what legal does do and what it definitely will not do. And I think we've already discussed that previously here, whereby there might be low value, low risk contracts that we just don't touch as a legal team because we don't deem that as deriving any value going forward.
So for me, legal ops can be defined by reference to the clock, the clock subject matter issues that they've identified, and I can't remember how many they are, but they're all your usual things like spend management, looking at projects, looking at how to optimise functions, use of technology, and they have a really robust list of things that to me are traditional legal ops criteria. But it's also interesting to understand why we're looking at this. And in thinking about today's presentation, I had a look at Richard Susskind's book, Tomorrow's Lawyers, which if you haven't had a chance to have a look at, it's fantastic. I think the 3rd edition is out now. But he talks about what this trend of the operationalisation, it's a big word, this late afternoon, the operationalisation of legal services. And he says this is coming about for 3 reasons. One is the more for less paradox, that, or the more for less paradigm that we're all pretty familiar with. The second is what he calls liberalisation, not deregulation, but liberalisation, which is legal services being accessed in different ways than traditional ways. And then thirdly, technology. So it is important to look through, for me, legal ops through a tech lens, but it's also important to understand those other paradigm shifts to ensure that in shaping legal ops, it can be an all-encompassing approach.
Yeah, maybe I'll just 2 short comments, which would be when I look at what service do we provide the business? We're there to provide a service to them. And I look at, well, what is the service delivery that we need to give to be most effective in our role? And second, that is, legal advice. And the second is, to inform strategy. And so how do we do that better? And a lot of that is, what we look at how to, access the business better, whether it is through, the information that we store and keep and how we disseminate that and how we communicate that better and how we can improve that over time.
Thanks. And I think, most of the panel summed up really well what legal operations means. I think, to me, it's about having a service delivery mindset and understanding that you are a part of the business machinery. And we can learn a lot from our colleagues in other areas of the business who do have that operational mindset, who are looking at, driving efficiencies and value, who do say no to certain tasks and certain opportunities as well. So it's about working really closely with the existing machinery in that organisation, be it your risk manager, your operations manager, and obviously your C-suite, to understand what your place is for that organisation and where you can add value, how best to do that with what you have and maybe with what you want to have.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you guys are in a really unique place to align people, process, and technology. Like we're kind of at the point where that is beginning to start to happen across all sorts of companies, not just in-house or not just commercial businesses, but everywhere. I guess to move on, what are some of the biggest pain points that you guys are facing across that legal ops life cycle?
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah.
One of them, I should say, I've been working at Burden now since 2019, and I was their first lawyer. We now have a team of 5 that support our team, and so in terms of the legal function, it's grown exponentially and in line with the business. And one of our pain points was really just having a sole source of truth for some certain key bits of information. And sometimes within the business, it's they're really simple things in terms of improving your operations. And I'm sure there's some companies out here in the audience that there are some really simple things you can do. So that was one big pain point: is sole source of truth for documents. I could talk on these points every day, but I'll pass on to another panelist.
Yeah, I was going to say for us, it's. The organisation is moving so quickly that we don't want legal to ever be the roadblock, right? We never want legal to be the ones that, we have to review this document before it goes out. And so I think part and parcel of operation, optimization for legal is outbound communication and education on how to and when to engage legal. I know I mentioned it before, but we've developed resources. Those resources I think are pretty easy to navigate. They're pretty user-friendly, but how do we get people to, in a time-poor commercial business, to engage with them as opposed to going, you know what, I just can't be bothered, I'll just go ask legal, right? Like the IT help desk type model. That's, I think, our primary pain point.
Yeah, I've got a top 3, and I've been at Sydney Fish Market for about 3.5 years now. I came from a larger legal team into a role where I was the first in-house counsel, the first GC at Sydney Fish Market, where even all of the legal records relating to the business weren't held by the business, they're held by external lawyers. So I had this grand plan that everything was going to be modernised and there was going to be all this tech and everything was just going to be really robust and I was going to execute on that really quickly. That unfortunately didn't happen. I'm still facing most of the same challenges today. My top 3 issues, They do change. They're more or less the same things, but the order changes from time to time. Probably the source of truth, which was mentioned before, so document repository, and then contract management, which spins out of that. That's really my number 1 priority at the moment. Second, right now, is probably legal spend management. I think that's become about. We have some very large litigation matters going on at the moment, and spend is quite important on those things. And then lastly, matter management is pretty important too.
Thanks, guys. You want to add?
Yeah, I think for us, we're still grappling a lot with our internal workload management, and we are at the point where actually, having that dashboard, that central source of truth, having the tools that connect together all the smaller pieces of information that we collect, that we have, and the tools that we work through is one of the main challenges for me. So we're at the very beginning of our tech optimization journey, but and I can talk about it a bit more afterwards. But we've done a lot on the process optimization, but it's leaving the legal team still, struggling to keep our heads above water when it comes to the workload management.
So I guess to move on with you specifically, like what role do you think legal plays within the context of digital transformations within the business?
I think in terms of business technology transformation, obviously there's, and I'm the privacy officer, so that's a big part of it as well, is conducting those privacy risk assessments as part of the project. And advising about the transaction itself and being there to support the working group on the integration and implementation, where new processes will be created that will touch the legal team, because we all know something new happens in the business and suddenly legal has new functions to deliver, new new work that comes across your desk from people who maybe previously haven't had to work with. So for me, I think the role or where we play a part, I think, is from the very beginning and being a part of the voice at the table to support that working group from the beginning all the way through.
May I comment? I think we need to have a very clear role as, when legal's doing something and when it's actually something that should sit with another business unit, because we're probably not the best person to drive it. A discussion, I think it was in the cyber resilience session we had earlier, there was a question around whether you'd done your data mapping. And that's an exercise that's been done within our organisation. But I think and it hasn't been done by our team, but it's obviously really relevant to our team, but it's been done by the team that really deals with the data. And obviously it's really directly relevant to us. And I think as lawyers, we need to be really, we're problem solvers, and we love to lean in and we love to fix things and we love to get it done. But I think we also need to be really good listeners, and we need to learn when we need to listen to what the other teams need and want from us. And then also, and then feed into that process to support what they need to make sure that our legal services are delivered in the most efficient way that they want to see it. We've got to think about who the end user is. And so as part of your process around optimising, I think you need to think, okay, well, I need to do that listening exercise first. I need to be really clear about what my role is, what their role is, and then we can work to get this actually executed and done, because you've scoped it appropriately and then also obviously sort of budget for it and funded it. But you've then got that buy-in because you've got a very strong clarity over roles.
Ryan, I actually think this is a really good question for you, but we can't implement innovative solutions until stakeholders have been brought into the process, brought along for the journey, and understand their roles within the transformation. You specifically, being at Eucalyptus, which is like a high growth startup, how are you refining and I guess translating the business, what legal doesn't do? How are you bringing on external, stakeholders within the business along that transformation journey?
Yeah, I think just building on what Cicely has said, it's we all know that reader's logic versus writer's logic, right? Like we learned that as junior lawyers, we write in the way that we think we think that the people digesting that information would like to read it, but we're often so wrong. And I remember there was this program at the firm that I was at, which was, hey, how to write not like a lawyer, but still convey the right advice. It's the same thing, I think, with any project delivery or implementation of tech. It's like, hey, stop trying to think that we have the answers. I think someone asked Steve Jobs, like, hey, is the customer always right? It's like, hell no, because if you always ask the customer, these innovations would never have come about. So I guess what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that you go to the business, find out where the pain points are, what they would like to see, how they would, and for them to give an example of a business unit they love working with. So for an example, at Eucalyptus, the business loves working with the engineering team. I was like, what the freak? Why? Every time you try to ask the engineering team for work, they always say, no, it's not a priority, right? But the thing is, they have an open dashboard. You see what requests have come in to the engineering team, where the priorities lie in terms of P1s, P2s, P3s. And then you realize, oh, my ask doesn't sit anywhere near as a P1, P2, P3. And I understand that the engineers are spending their time building X, Y, and Z on these things, which are really important. So if people like the way that engineers operate, then why don't we, this is like very Eucalyptus-y, like previous company wasn't like that, but why don't we adopt that way of working and optimizing and go, okay, well, what do you guys want? How do you want to see the projects that legal work on? Okay, now I'll another 30 seconds if you give me the benefit. We're discussing this as prep prior to this panel, and that example sounds really intimidating. Like, how would you build a system or a model? There's a really simple way that we all know how to use spreadsheets, right? We're not as good as economists and bankers, but I'm not. But very simple way which I would propose if you're ever interested in communicating upcoming project work or forecasting and then showing your business, which I've just implemented and it works. It's basically a spreadsheet. Columns are months. Rows are projects. So projects like, I don't know, some M&A or a privacy overhaul. And then you estimate your FTE burn on each month. And that will then collate as totals on the top of that month. And you'll be able to say, oh, look, in this month, there's a 5.0 FTE burn on the basis of projects, and we only have 4 people on the team. So a CFO, we're going to have to outsource some of this, or we just don't do some of these projects. Really simple tool, and it's really helped with communicating and generating buy-in in the business.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of extra comments, and I'm going to answer this in a fairly roundabout way by referring back to the previous question, which was around legal and technology and who's running the projects. From my perspective, scope creep or strategy drift in the legal function is one of the biggest challenges that I face. I work in a small to medium-sized business where we're all required to do things beyond our current role or the role that we were hired to do. But of course, that at times feels like it's never ending. And this is no different when dealing with stakeholders. And I think also as part of the discussion, this wasn't my point, I think Liz, you raised this, was around being clear about what the strategy is of the legal department at the beginning enables, I think, for me, a better communication with the stakeholders, because if I come back to that strategy, I'm always very clear about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. And then with the stakeholders, it's much easier to engage because the line can be drawn around, well, what is your responsibility and what is legal's responsibility?
Yeah, and I might add to that as well. And I think that as part of setting yourself up to, to be able to really set those rules around what you do and don't do, it's really important that you think about what your organisation strategy is, and then as an operational element of the business, how does that translate to your strategy, whether it's your legal strategy or your processes and the framework around what you do and don't take on. So thanks, Michael.
Cicely, you made a really good point about this earlier, but every business is really on a constant journey to improve their data access, storage, standardization, and accessibility for everyone in the organization. I guess to start with you, like, what role does legal play in this context? So, and especially because we all come from such different organizations, like, what is the importance of having that standardized data set and the processes behind it within the legal realm as you begin to weigh up digital transformation projects?
Again, picking from probably one of the earlier sessions, talking about how the speed, businesses operate at in terms of, and also just competition. As a legal function, you want to be able to operate really quickly because you want to get ahead of your competition. You just want to, the faster you do it, the cheaper it should be as well. But you also just want to get in there to get the opportunity. So there's an incentive on us to be fast, and for us to be fast, our operational teams really need to know when they can make certain decisions, and our documents need to support that, and there needs to be some standardisation. We've got a number of different divisions and they've all got different risk appetites and different drivers, and so part of when I look at legal optimisation, the optimisation of what we can deliver as a service, it's been really challenging because of that differentiation, but I'm starting to see some repetition, which I can then build in, some more standardisation to support them. And so that process for me has been about making it really clear what my data is and storing that data and making it accessible in a way that we can then use it really quickly. And then as our, to talk about the tech side of things, as our tech capability increases, our data sets are really, really clear. So that what we're pulling from is certain, and it's we know it's good. Otherwise, you can be pulling from something that is actually not that helpful and is not going to deliver you what you need. So as a first step, it has been about really shoring up what we've got internally to then propel us down the track.
Sorry, Travis, I just wanted to press pause. We just passed the halfway mark. I just wanted to give people an opportunity to ask a question, maybe legal ops, very hot topic. Got a question here, thank you.
Probably a bit of a two-pronged question. When it comes to using systems, technology, all those other pieces, we know that legal's a pretty small functionality internally. I guess how much do you lean into other parts of the organisation, Ryan, for example, engineering, and two, how effective have you found that in building or developing the tools that you need to run your teams and functions?
Yeah, look, I think if another organisation, another part of the business is using tools that are tried and tested, and we can tweak the way legal have traditionally been, engaging the other parts of the business, then you've already got some buy-in, right? So I've been at Eclipse for 18 months, came in, there was no legal function. Engineers, a lot of them are ex-Atlassian, so they were using Jira. I hate Jira, but we used it and it worked. And because we started to get that buy-in, we were able to then move off and went to ClickUp, and ClickUp is incredible. If you guys ever want to use a project management tool that's like Asana on steroids, think about ClickUp. So that's helped from the buy-in perspective. And I guess, I'm comparing this to the prior corporate in-house role I had. They weren't as nimble, and I think many of us can relate to that in terms of onboarding new tech. So, I'm fortunate. I'm in an organisation where the wheels are quite lubricated in that regard. But when it comes to onboarding new tech, I think Congo can talk to this. I ask vendors and I ask them to provide me with the underpinnings or the assumptions to provide me with an ROI calculator or some use case, even if it's net zero. So a lot of them come back and say, "You'll save 250 grand on this." I'm like, that's BS, because I can break apart all these assumptions, and we don't price our time internally. But if you can come back on this on net zero, then it's actually like CFO, COO, CEO sign off is a lot easier. And if you can, show that with some intelligibility, then usually gets up. Short answer.
I'm going to make one quick further comment. It's a really good question. I'm a big fan of enterprise-wide solutions, even if they need to be rolled out, phased in on a piecemeal basis. Our IT people use Jira as well.
Don't worry, Ryan, we're there as well.
Yeah, and I'm a bit hesitant to use it. But and a couple of people have said this already, and it's been in other presentations, when I view an organisation's data set as the primary objective here, when we talk about contract management or source of truth and all this stuff, it's just part of the organisation's data. And I really believe that we need to look at the whole of the organisation's data set and capture that in order to do the work properly. Now, yes, there needs to be some categorisation of things that might relate to legal so you can easily find them, but there's no use, in my view, legal going off and doing some kind of great piece of work that's just for legal, and then not having it integrated with the rest of the organisation, because sure enough, the bit that you're missing is going to be from somewhere else.
We've got one more question there, Shivam. Yeah, it's Mike's behind you. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the data set piece because I think it's really interesting. I think what's been really compelling to my business is to talk about contracts and the role of legal as essentially assets of the business. And so if you're breaking down what legal does into core value drivers, and then you're working with your stakeholders to figure out how they're going to use it. So not just getting the contract executed, but how do we identify the IP that sits under this content agreement that's going to then be able to tell another team that contract is capable of, say, flow on rights or something else that could be interesting to another team. Then we plug that into an AI tool that tells us across the 50,000 people across the world all working on this same product, how can they identify an asset that then they can then commercialize that turn into something exciting. And then just on Jira, I also use Jira, but I think one thing I found really useful is taking your engineers aside and saying how do you use this to your full potential? How do I visualize it? How do I create cool things out of Jira? Because as an basic user, it sucks. But when you get a TPM or someone to teach you how to turn it into something really valuable and you can then speak their language, then you can sort of document what's above the line and below the line, and then take them into that buy-in of you are my customer, I want to deliver you what you need, I can do this or I can do this, and here's how much I've got left. which one's more important to you, and then you can then roll it out as like, use their language, P0s, P1s. I can do this with an extra half head. I can do this with an external resource. And then you can figure out where you've got like OPEX to play with or headcount, and then you can then horse trade instead of making the decisions on behalf of the business and bringing them into that, and then they really feel like you're a partner along the process.
That's great. Yeah, that's the holy grail.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, can I, legal naturally plays a role. Well, I think good way of looking at it is legal needs to play a role that provides some friction, right? Naturally, like that's why legal teams oftentimes exist, provide guardrails. But it's also useful to then communicate, well, where's the healthy friction? Where should that be done so that there's a better outcome? Versus where do you reduce or eliminate friction entirely? And I think that is like the two-prong approach of what optimization is, right? So like making sure the business knows that, hey, when these things, this is when we can add value, and this is the process. And when it's these things, we're not gonna add any value. So forget it, like go ahead and sign that document. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up about your journey transitioning from Jira to that ClickUp tool. A lot of us, I think quite a number of us in this room, probably already use some of these tools, and I'm in that position where we need to transition a tool to something else. I want you to share about your journey transitioning that tool. What did you do? And how did you identify that this ClickUp was your next holy grail? And you know, the corrective and preventive measures you've taken since implementing it.
Yeah, to be honest, I probably won't go into detail on that, but I will reach out to you after the session and exchange your details, because I might just be too specific in example to benefit the rest of the people in the room. But yeah, I'm more than happy to share that because it was a process and there was some friction to overcome. Is that okay? Can I do that or can I not? No, I'd love to talk to you, yeah.
You could go a bit more broad and talk about what the role legal plays in the wider context of a digital transformation.
Good call. All right,
not
so
specific tool.
Yeah, I think the key thing for us was realizing that like no matter how much of a power user we become of this tool that was used addressing the earlier point that we naturally want to harmonize tools within a business, we realized that Jira didn't enable us to use it as power users in the way that we wanted to as a legal function. And I don't know if is anyone familiar with it? It was built a long time ago. It was first to market. It's great, wonderful platform, blah, blah, but it's not easy to customize. And there's a lot of back-end issues and whatnot. And so the whole premise, you guys remember the Apple and Samsung? No, Apple and PC ads? Remember those? Yeah, so the whole ClickUp premise is like Jira is the old PC. And so like ClickUp does it, and it's so true. It's like, hey, do you suffer from Jira? Anyway, so like we moved over, and it's you guys watch the YouTube ads. It's very, very good advertising. But it was very helpful. And what it did was now the IT team want to move over to ClickUp. So legal in that sense was a spearhead to go, well, yeah, we had ex-Atlassian guys come and build that into the team, but we've found something that's a bit easier to use and unlocks a lot of functions. So now the IT and the risk components have moved over to ClickUp. Soon enough, engineers will be too. So, you know, legal can play a role in facilitating change like that too.
Cecily, please.
Yeah, I think the point about legal being a super user is a good one, and keeping in mind that the tools that we might use can really benefit other areas of the business as well. So I can't speak for what Council's using, but certainly in terms of the products that I've looked at, I can see an application and a benefit to other areas. So I think if you can, it's probably more of a comment on how to get your business case across to get your piece of technology that you want, but make sure that you understand other processes in the organisation and see where you could get that wider benefit, because in the same way that the legal team could be looking at what you can use in the existing organisation tech stack, whatever you bring in could add value elsewhere, and in theory, it should be able to, if you're going to get the best value out of it.
Especially around procurement.
Yeah.
There's 100% overlap between procurement and legal.
Yeah, we were talking about that in preparation for this, about when does that sit in a procurement function and a legal function, and when is it worth legal getting involved and procurement, which is why we're talking about roles, and is that a legal role or not? And I think these are all questions that you need to align to your strategy, and goes to what do you take on, and the integration piece with, does it actually fit, and that whole listening exercise, and all comes full circle.
Yeah. Do we have any questions before we continue on? Anybody? Okay, cool. So I want to now pivot to the future. So in the future, what tasks, and I actually open this to the room, what tasks do you think AI would ideally handle as part of your job versus what tasks are going to remain in the purview of counsel? Anybody want to take that one?
Anyone?
I've got a microphone here in case.
Yep.
Yell it. Yeah, let's do it.
The automated response that I send every time someone says, "Can you help me with this?" and I say, "Have you checked?" In this playbook, on a more deeper note, the automated advice that I give to the business every time I repeat problems. Pretty simple problems that keep popping up over and over again.
Would you mind repeat the comment to the online audience?
So what's AI going to help me not do in the future? It's providing the standard response to the business. Have you consulted this section in this playbook? And then also the standard advice that I give to the business every time we have a repeat problem pop up.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, there's no limit to what AI can do. I think we've seen it do pretty amazing things, and I'm sure there's much more to come in this space. It made me again go back to Richard Susskind's book, where he talks about lawyers of the future and future roles for lawyers. And many of the roles are focused on things like AI, data analytics, things of that nature, which I don't believe are legal functions. And I think that's the really interesting part about the development of the legal ops space, is that increasingly legal functions will be performed by non-lawyers and machines. So we've got these three things coexisting together. And will it be harmonious? Right now it probably is, but I think there'll be conflicts in the future.
I might take probably a very practical, very insightful, Michael, thank you. I might take a practical approach and pick up on some of Carly's comments from earlier. And one of the reasons why I said, cleaning up our data sources was really important to us, and that bit about IP and IP commercialization. So one of the things, we are looking at is, how do we do that better? And where I think that AI will help us is if we've got really good data sets that we can then, overlay with that AI is to, pull that out, and then as lawyers we can analyse and see how we do that. So, I see fundamental to our journey has been to make sure that data source is really clear to us, so that we can then use those functions as tools so that we can do a much better job at what we do, because they'll take that search time out. They'll take, they'll just make it much quicker, I'm hoping, and more targeted.
What I'd love to see, I don't remember the last time I looked or I logged into a LexisNexis database to conduct research. But what I would love to see is one of these monolithic publishers of legal research, right? Be able to engage with AI in a way that new lawyers can turn up and phrase a question appropriately and get a counsel level response based on the data which is built within that database. Because right now you've got AI, ChatGPT, whatever it is, the ones that we're using, they're just drawing stuff from the internet, right? And the internet can have commentaries which are inaccurate. I recently asked something about the distinction between unfair dismissal and wrongful wrongful termination or whatever, and it got completely wrong. But it'd be great for these platforms to use a closed loop knowledge, which is like vetted and published by experts in the field, like it currently is, but you don't have to trawl through and find the answers.
So like a legal specific large language model.
Yeah, 100%. Like the linguistic corpus should be limited to that ecosystem.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, I was just going to say, Lext, which is moderating the next panel after this on AI, does that. So they are a chat GPT for lawyers, so there you go. Sorry, we have a question there, yep.
I was just going to comment on that. That was literally my pitch to an Amazon team the other day. Even just in my own inbox, I would love someone to pull up advices I've already done. So I work in the expansion space, and so you could have a $250,000 worth of due diligence that sits per country in your inbox, and it sits in a database that's really, really hard to access. So right now I'm relying on my memory of which country I saw a business licensing issue related to this particular thing. I can search and it'll take me a zillion years. If I take it out of my inbox, then it becomes really difficult to manage. So one of the things our engineering team are working on for me right now is exactly that, because we, particularly in big organizations, I think one of the extra challenges is you can't really use external tools that don't manage data in a way that we're, allowed to. And so you kind of need to also have the skills to motivate the engineering team to explain the use cases of how it's going to help all sorts of businesses in different areas. But if you can pull data out of a due diligence questionnaire, convert it into a due diligence memo, or pull from your own memos that are literally on that topic and create a template of those draft responses, and then you give them different prompts. So I need a 2-second answer, I need a 10-second answer, and I need a memo. And then you can then figure out how to now turn that data into a visual. How do I turn that to an S-team level memo in a particular format that's company specific? I think that would be awesome. And then we absolutely still need us, because we need to analyze it and then, figure out where the right risk plays are, but not doing all of the low level work and the, hard thinking around where is that in my inbox would be a huge accelerator.
Anybody else? That was an amazing response, by the way.
I got a question. It's about the AI, the role of AI for the transaction monitoring program called TMP. So, we engaged the external law firm. They suggested that we use the hybrid approach for TMP. And what is your opinion for the role of AI in relation to transaction monitoring program? For example, suspicious matter report to Austrac and things like that. What is your opinion?
I actually can't answer that question, but a similar one, because I've just had a presentation this week. It's not on transaction reporting, but apparently, and we're looking to install this at the new Sydney Fish Market, but with the surveillance cameras, what the security companies are now telling us is that they can actually predict when there'll be an incident. Now, I'm not sure how that happens, but that's kind of blew me away. Yeah, I don't know, but I believe it when I see it, but it's not the direct answer to the question.
I can actually provide a bit of advice on this, not legal advice. I know in some markets, tax authorities are looking to do continuous transaction tax payment obligations. So in Australia, depending on what tax structure you're adopting, you remit your BAS on a monthly or a quarterly basis. In some jurisdictions, they are moving towards every time the transaction is entered into, the tax is remitted at that point in time. So that's not here in Australia yet, but it is something that I am keeping my eye out on, because you think about businesses that operate on a monthly cadence, that collect monthly payments, you're going to have to remit tax to the tax authority on a monthly basis. So AI definitely would have a role to play in anything where you are monitoring and need to make an immediate disclosure, whether it's a data breach, a tax obligation, a financial listing notice, those things, those run-of-the-mill things that we all know, we know we need to update ASIC 28 days within X happening. We don't need to do that. We're paid too much to have to worry about that. But somehow, that's still something that sits in the back of my mind. So AI definitely can help us for those run-of-the-mill, low value, but really high risk issues.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, but maybe Travis, if you wanted to give like one parting piece of advice or guidance on legal ops or what Conga is seeing, that would be fantastic to close out the session.
Appreciate that. I would say if I were to give one piece of parting advice, you guys are so important to how organizations make money. Legal, as you guys were kind of talking about earlier, is often there to slow the process down a little bit to obviously reduce the risk, but optimizing your legal operations is absolutely essential to speeding up the quote to cash process for the business. So I think before you guys really think that you're in this silo, you're actually like an integral part of a deal team, of a commercial operation. And I would actually start to look at yourselves that way, because legal is such an important function in the overall, I guess, revenue generating part of the business. You guys are absolutely a revenue generating part of the business, not a cost center.
Thank you so much. Please give them a big round of applause. We have Michael, Travis, Ryan, Elizabeth, Cicely. Thank you so much. All right, so it's Ninja activity time or Ninja challenge time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you have 15 minutes, and there are 5 VIP passes to, can we see this? Okay, wait. So the challenge is you have to take a group selfie of 5 packs or less, post it on LinkedIn with a creative caption, tag each other, me and Law Ninja, just so that I can see it, and you will win prizes. Now, maybe just take a photo of this so that in case you don't want to forget it. So basically, take a group selfie, post it on LinkedIn, tag each other, me and Law Ninjas, and then you will win prizes. And the prizes are a set of 5 VIP passes to Soma, which is the best gym in Australia, according to me. It's a luxury gym just down the road at Chifley, and each pass is worth $150, and you're also going to win some more stuff. So, group selfie of 5 packs, and we're going to be back here in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Let's play some music, Cam. Please. I think we can get started. Just as a recap of the Ninja Challenge, you had to take a group selfie of 5 packs, post it on LinkedIn, tag each other, tag me, and you can win prizes. Hopefully, there will be some prizes to give out. All right, so the next panel is called Stepping into the Future, AI and Tech. And I think with the advent of ChatGPT and everything that's come after it, including GPT-4 and the rest, it's a very interesting and hot topic. And I think we've got a video that we wanted to play just before we welcome our speakers on stage. All right, so there was a lot going on. So LextAI is our sponsor for this panel, and as I said earlier in the legal ops panel, LextAI is kind of like a ChatGPT for lawyers, but I'm sure there's a better way that David from Lex will be able to sort of elaborate on that. So please give a big round of applause and welcome our speakers to the stage.
We got enough mics? You guys have got mics over there? You got a mic over there? Yes, we got. Thanks very much, Rowan. My name is David Turner. I'm a lawyer. I've practiced in large international firms, boutique firms, and at the bar. I'm also a software developer and the co-founder of Lext, a legal technology company that makes the law easier to access and easier to practice. And that includes applications like the one you just saw that leverage large language models and generative AI for legal use cases. We also help enterprises and law firms to design, develop and implement bespoke artificial intelligence solutions for their specific use cases. So some of the people who had some great ideas during the last session, come see me. Now we're going to get started, and our session's on AI and tech, but I think given AI is bigger than the Beatles at the moment, it'll be firmly focused on the former rather than the latter. And there's more than just hype as a reason for focusing on artificial intelligence in the panel today. One, this is a technology that's really perfectly suited to our industry and our profession. This is really an inflection point at which natural language processing technology can unlock so much data that's been trapped in large blocks of legalese. And we're really excited at Lext about the possibilities there. But the other reason why we really need to talk about this topic is that I think all of us, and hands up if you disagree with me, all of us use artificial intelligence every single day. Anyone disagree? No? You do? Yeah. Whether you've got a car with lane assist or a social media account or a Netflix or Spotify subscription, you're using artificial intelligence every single day. And we're going to be talking about that today because generative AI is the buzz, but there are many meanings to the word AI, and Jen, I'll be looking to you to talk us through some of those. Now, we won't step on the toes of the legal ops session too much, but before we do, I just want to talk about one thing that I promise we'll come back to on the topic of AI a little bit later, and that's, we often think about the adoption of legal technology in in-house teams as a way to improve operational efficiency in the in-house team. But I'd love to hear from our panellists, Ilona and Jen especially. What's your experience been in using legal technology to deliver value, expertise, knowledge to the business directly?
I'm sort of noticing I'm the only person with old school paper and when we're talking about technology, but it's an interesting question. I look back, I remember when it was exciting and transformation, we were moving from WordPerfect 5.1 to Microsoft Word. I think there's other people in the audience that remember that era, if I can put it that way. And when we got yellow paper for the fax machine, that was also a highlight. But we've moved a long way since then, and I think that's good, right? Some of you people weren't probably even born when that happened, but that's okay. So I think when it comes to what tech we're using in-house, I think some of the things you need to think about are you a global company or are you local? Because sometimes with global companies, you just have one solution globally, and usually Australia is at the bottom end of the world and probably the smallest amount of revenue, so your voting power is a little bit limited. But if you have sort of a standalone, I think you've got a lot more to say and a lot more input that you can give to teams. And I'll refer to my handwritten notes. But some of the things we sort of have a look about is how much is your organisation driven by the IT function? So if you're an AI tech company growing, the engineering team kind of leads the charge. And if you actually have a look at your tech stack, most organisations will have to do some sort of consolidation because everyone has implemented some system that they used once upon a time and we like it, and as people go, we don't sort of retire them, and all of a sudden you've got all these different solutions that kind of do bits and pieces. So I think one of the key things you need to look at from a legal perspective is there something out there that I can already be using, rather than implementing, I know a legal solution, so I'll use that one. But have a look and work with your IT teams. But I might throw to Jen.
100% agree with that. I think it's all very well and good to think about, from a legal perspective, what are the platforms out there, tools out there that can help drive operational efficiency for your team. But at the end of the day, there's a pragmatic reality overlaying all of this, which is budget. And it is highly unlikely you would be approved for budget to go off on a frolic to get some fancy tool for your team if it's something completely different to what the organization is doing. And in particular, with a tech lens, I guess, where, as Ilona said, engineering teams, they are the engine, no pun intended, of our company. They have very strong preferences on their own tech stacks. And part of being in-house legal in a tech company like Harrison AI is you need to be agile enough to adopt to their way of working. So there's no point putting in place a legal ops system that they don't know how to use, don't know how to interact with, etc. It's much better if you can, as Ilona said, assess what's already there. What's already there that the legal team can actually adopt. If it's a Slack-based organization like mine, how much can we use Slack? Obviously not for privileged materials, but how much can we actually leverage Slack so that people want to interact with you and find it easy to interact with you? I think that's key.
Absolutely. Victor, I want to ask you this from a kind of customer service focused perspective, I suppose, because I think all of us in the room would want our in-house function to be a customer focused function, serving our internal customers. What role did digital transformation play in creating the kind of customer-focused culture in the Department of Customer Service and Service New South Wales? Because it's really the gold standard of kind of customer-focused government, customer-focused public service. And I think a lot of us in the room can learn how we can use technology in our in-house teams to deliver that value to our internal customers.
Yeah, a significant role. Like we can't replace the human at the front in the sense that that warm handshake, that glint in the eye, the reassuring pat on the back when there's a bushfire and somebody needs assurance. Like that's priceless. That's what it is to be human, to connect. So that's critical. That human culture, that EQ was critical. But what we did is we increasingly built up our IQ through, obviously the data models that was coming through. Now, a classic example is government is just so hard to control. It's just the ugliest beast you've ever seen. And anybody trying to control it, it's like a raging bull. And the poor customer is the China, delicate thing. The only way to control it is essentially through customer feedback. Because if you grab the bull by the tail, you get swatted. Grab it by the horns, you get mauled. There's just no way. But if the nose ring that I found was the customer feedback, and that is because if we know where the pain points are, I heard what the previous speakers were saying in relation to Steve Jobs, and innovation. But the reality is, if you can at least identify in real time what those pain points are, then feed that into the EQ, then you're going to get a far more superior experience. And that's pretty much the magic in service. Superior EQ and really smart back end.
It's the human in the loop.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks very much. I promise we will come back to this concept of customer service in-house towards the end of the session. Let's talk about AI now. Before we do, I realised I kind of rushed through the introductions a little bit. I introduced myself, but very rudely didn't introduce anyone else. We're all playing roles in this sort of burgeoning artificial intelligence ecosystem, in this artificial intelligence community. Before we move on to our next question, I might start with you, Jen. Do you want to introduce yourself, Harrison AI, and what you're doing in AI?
Sure. So I am General Counsel and Co-Sec of Harrison AI. It is a Sydney-based AI medtech startup. What we do is we build AI diagnostic assist tools in different healthcare verticals. And that's a lot of fancy kind of sounding words, but if you boil it down to it, think about when you go and get an X-ray and your radiologist can bring up your X-ray, and at the time of doing so, they have an AI-powered software helping them identify in real-time anomalies in the scan. And think about how that could then be, that concept could then be applied to different types of healthcare verticals, be it pathology, be it oncology for cancer detection. And that's essentially what we do. It's not treatment, it's diagnostic assist.
Now, Victor, you're probably the person who least needs an introduction on the panel, but we'd love to hear what you're working on now, especially at UNSW in terms of the intersection between regulation, trust and tech.
Yeah, so I'm 3 months out of politics and enjoying that 3 months, let me tell you. But 1 day a week, I'm a director at it's a collaboration between UNSW and UTS, Trustworthy Digital Society Hub, where we, again, if trust is not a prefix to digital, then the book closes, quite frankly. So what can we do? And I'm thinking about some big strategic plays that we can do that will be nation shaping to build capacity. I don't want to boil the ocean, just 2 or 3 big things. And then the other 4 days, or 6 days, 5 days a week, will be like a number of large organisations and companies are asking, and governments are already reaching out saying, look, we're all on the journey. If you can sort of share some lessons, share some scar tissue, that would be good. So I'm sort of feeling my way in that area.
And also Tech Council of Australia.
That starts on 1 July. But I like the tech community is, they've been so good to me. So, just joining, I've been honoured to be part of the Tech Council board. So if I can sort of give back through that, that'd be, it's the very, very least I could do.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to asking you about some of those trust issues around risks in AI a little bit later. And Ilona.
Hi everyone, I'm Ilona Meyer. I'm the General Counsel and Company Secretary with a company called Nuix. So when I'm trying to keep the company out of court and out of the front page, we actually have an amazing Australian tech story where we have data analytics software where we process, and probably every lawyer in this room at some point in time will go through e-discovery, tools and all of that exciting. I do remember we had to stick barcodes on documents once upon a time, so I'm really excited to be part of something a little bit more innovative. But we now have the addition of NLP in our software, where we can now start predicting clusters of words and texts, which is really, really important when you're coming to putting that list together. So we have, all of our customers are people that I'm not allowed to name, but I can talk about regulators and banks and law firms. That's probably the extent that I can share, but it is something that is widely used, and I think still Australia's best kept secret about what our product actually does and delivers.
Amazing market traction, even with all that secrecy. That's what you want. Now, Jen, I'm going to throw back to you to talk about some definitions around AI, because I don't know if anyone's been counting, we've probably said it 40, 50 times so far on the panel, but we haven't actually defined the term, if it's capable of definition. When we use the term in conversation today, in June 2023, given the events of the last 6 or 7 months, we're probably talking about generative AI, we're probably talking about transformer architecture, diffusion models, but it's a much broader church than that, isn't it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your definition of AI, especially with what Harrison's doing?
I'll have a crack. I'm sure there'll be people in the room that have there will be some AI purists and others that will take a different view, but if you distill what AI, artificial intelligence, is in its most purest or simplest concept, I would say that it is building a machine that does something that a brain can do. It could be a human brain, it could be an animal brain. That is at its most simplest. I think it's, to understand what AI is, it is kind of important to understand its history as well. Something that a lot of people are not that aware of is that whilst AI may be a ubiquitous tool now, it's in your smartphones, it drives your Netflix recommendation engines, etc. It's not new. It's been around for quite a long time. And its roots go all the way back to around 1950 with Alan Turing, which I'm sure most, if not everyone in this room knows about, the British mathematician, and who accidentally invented the modern computer. And Alan Turing presented what we now call the Turing test. And essentially what that test was meant to do was test the intelligence of a machine. It did that by having a human interrogator ask a series of questions of a machine. And the point of the test was, if the human interrogator was unable to tell the difference between the responses as to whether the response was being given by a machine versus a human, then that machine was deemed to be intelligent. So it actually goes quite a far way back. The term AI itself was coined back around mid-1950s. And that was by a US researcher called John McCarthy. And that was, I wouldn't say accidental, but it wasn't meant to be a fanfare. The term AI was coined by him as part of research funding grant application. From there, though, there was a huge boom in AI development and investment and research. Mostly on general applications of AI. There was a lot of hype back then and promises of what AI could solve for society, for the economy, etc. It all kind of came to a grinding halt around the 1970s when the research and development at the time just didn't quite meet up with expectations of the big problems that AI was going to solve. And so funding was pulled. But everything came back to life again in the 80s when people started realizing there was dollars attached to AI. You could commercialize it. And that led to a massive period of growth. The research focus in AI shifted to more narrow applications of AI. And what I mean by that is the development of what we call expert systems. Things that could, expert systems that could solve specific problems rather than answer kind of general issues or problems. And that led to, in the new millennium, in 2000s, robotic AI, your Roomba vacuum cleaner for the home that goes around your whole house. In 2010, Apple launched Siri, which was a huge breakthrough in speech recognition. That's AI technology. And then DeepMind obviously came on the scene at about the same time as well. Now that leads to the current boom, this current era of boom in AI, and that is now where we squarely kind of are. And the focus of the current boom is mostly on machine learning. It's not exclusively about machine learning, but mostly. Now it's machine learning development. And this is where the terminology starts to get a bit murky. A lot of people use machine learning interchangeably with AI, but it doesn't mean the same thing. Think of AI as your broad umbrella term for this entire industry or area of exploration. Machine learning is a subset of AI. And what machine learning is, again, in a nutshell, would be a computer program that learns from data without being explicitly programmed to do so. That's essentially machine learning. And there are three main types or learning techniques of machine learning. There's supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And what deep learning does is it pulls from all those three main types of machine learning and is kind of powering what we are now seeing as the generative AI phase. I sound like I'm being a bit derogatory, and I don't mean to be, but I think it's more, there is a bit of frustration when the talk du jour now is all Gen AI, generative AI, this, generative AI, that. That is not representative at all of the AI tech that is available in the market. It is the talk du jour, I think, because it's the first time that the AI technology is accessible by everyone. You don't need a machine learning degree to be able to interact with it and to extract some value from it. But there is obviously a downside to generative AI because it's not built to tell you truth. It's not built for accuracy. And there's obviously Harrison AI, being an AI diagnostic assist tool developer, that is not the field in which we play. So Gen AI or generative AI, they're powered by what we call foundation models. LLMs, or large learning models, is a type of foundation models. These are effectively neural networks that have an ability to have a feedback loop so that it can learn, but it is based on vast amounts of unstructured, unlabeled data. So it just spits out what seems plausible because it's unstructured output, so images, free text, etc. But the downside is accuracy it's not guaranteed, nor is it the purpose of that tool. Hopefully that's helpful.
Unless you've got some great Lext knowledge retrieval architecture over the top.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks so much for that great explanation. And I think for contextualizing it in the kind of what we call the AI winter phase, right, of the 70s and the 90s, because it's easy to think of this as a single inflection point and not as one that's occurred several times over the last 60 years. Right? You talked about some of the downsides there, some of the risks. Back in 2019, when GPT-2 was released as an open source model, OpenAI said, because large language models cannot distinguish fact from fiction, we do not support any use cases that require the output to be true. Right? It's pretty foundational, but we don't say that quite so loudly these days. Let's talk about some of the risks of artificial intelligence, especially generative AI. Well, we won't talk about legal risks just yet. We'll get onto those when we talk about how we advise the business specifically. But what are some of these risks? Because I think we often think about the risks of AI that pop culture has inculcated us to think about, the existential risk, right? The killer robot, right? But that's not really the risk that is really being posed to us here and now, notwithstanding the letters and statements signed by global technology leaders about analogies to nuclear war and pandemics.
Is that for me?
Take the lead, Jen. Yeah.
I think there's a shopping list of risks that attach itself to generative AI tools, and part of it goes back to exactly what I was saying before. It is not a tool that is designed to give you truth. That is not what it's meant to do. And one of our directors, we were having a debate about LLMs recently, and he came up with a phrase which I'm going to steal because I thought it was a really neat way to present the risk problem. Language is not knowledge. That in itself articulates the risk that you may be dealing with. And if you are going to use it in certain ways, then you need to be using it obviously judiciously. In the same way that you're not going to write a piece of legal advice just based on what Dr. Google is going to tell you. I would strongly recommend that you're not using Gen AI tools to simply pass your legal advice through to your stakeholders. But without delving into specific kind of shopping list of legal risks, of which there are many, there's data privacy, there's IP, reliability, algorithmic bias in the machine itself, a lack of explainability, all of those things are true. But I think when you take a step back, it's really about assessing, well, what is the tool? What is it meant to do? And that informs how you should interact with it, and that determines what your risk profile is.
You know, there was a conversation in the last panel about your legal data as an asset, you know, and I think that's really something to think about when we talk about algorithmic bias. The kind of archetypal example of algorithmic bias is Amazon's model for filtering resumes. Well, it turns out if your hiring policy is overwhelmingly hire men, then your model of a good employee, a good employable person, is a man. And a algorithm will pick up on that pattern, whether you want it to or not. And so having that kind of hygiene and good practice before you adopt machine learning or artificial intelligence tools, the old adage is garbage in, garbage out. Look, it's trite, but it's true. You need to have those good practices in place before you can make them more efficient with artificial intelligence. Victor, on the public policy side, we're talking about these risks of mass misinformation, algorithmic bias. What are sort of the front of mind risks from a public policy perspective that you think government needs to be playing a role in?
I think in terms of Gen AI, I think it's truth, because I gave a speech a couple of years ago around, what do I call it, the trust trinity in a deglobalised world. And basically the trust trinity is we need to know in a digital world the who, that you are who you say you are, the what. You're allowed to work with kids, you're allowed to drive a car, you're allowed to do this, and the why. Why are you trustworthy? And in a physical world, I could be like St. Thomas, I can touch the wound and say, yeah, I know you're real, you're there. But in the digital world, you can't do that. I have no idea when I'm speaking to a doctor, a virtual one or otherwise, that person is who they say they are, that they are credentialed to say what they can do. So we need to build trust. Then you overlay that in some of the more fundamental things in our democracy around elections. It is so easy. And again, I don't think we're just scratching the surface right now, but imagine a world where you can generate context and people that are scared are searching for anchors. And if there are these false anchors out there that are curated for clickbait for them, where does that take democracy? So I think that is a huge risk. There's massive risks, as Jen said. And this is not Gen AI, this is just basic machine learning. You've got that dead hand in relation to the bomb. In the 50s they had this, Russia and America, they got this dead hand. So if they were nuked, Moscow was nuked, oh, don't worry, there's a dead hand there. We've been destroyed, but there'll be a machine that says bang, we'll retaliate. But they've got 20 odd minutes before the nuke hit Moscow or Washington. But now, with machine learning and with supersonic missiles, people don't have 20 minutes to make decisions. They've got maybe 5-10 minutes type thing. So increasingly that will be delegated, those decisions will be delegated to machine learning. You will not have time for people faceless people to sit around and say, what do we do here? So it can go from existential there to pushing people into prosperity through making sure that these are your qualifications, your skill set, this is best for you, or poverty in the event that algorithm is wrong, and we say, that's not good for you, you don't have many options.
And I suppose it's kind of facile to say, oh, well, there's a human in the loop who'll make the decision in the end, because that person's informed by the information that they're presented by a model.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like with increasingly sophisticated, like we just don't have the horsepower up here to process all that information at speed. So, it really becomes a function of time.
Absolutely. Let's drill down now into our in-house roles and what role AI plays in that. Alona, I've seen so many companies rushing to implement generative AI features, either for their customer-facing tools or internally. We've heard in the room lots of great ideas around external comms, marketing especially. That doesn't need to be true, right? Now, what role does legal play in supporting that adoption or resisting it? We should just ban it, right? Just ban ChatGPT, ban generative AI in the business, right?
Try saying that to a team of engineers. Look, I think I just wanted to say one thing. Generative AI is a tool. So is a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can build it to hit someone in the head with it, right? So what's important is the guide rails, like we all do as in-house lawyers, is to provide guide rails around how it's used, when it's used, because you'll never be able to say don't use it. So I think you need to be proactive in terms of, as a legal function, to say we want to partner with you and let's talk about how we're going to put some guide rails in place. It is like any sort of other risk that business takes. You give them guidelines, you engage with them, you get on the same page, and that's the policy. Then it needs to be like a compliance process. You need to audit it, make sure it's checked. Does it need to be improved? Is it still doing the right thing? So there's two aspects to it. One, definitely when you've got a product that is sold that includes generative AI, you absolutely need to have a very clear policy about what are our guidelines. You need to be able to stand by them. You need to be able to publish them. You need to be able to audit them. So I think that's probably, we're forced to do this a lot more quicker because, we're generating these products out there that we need to stand by. In terms of, from an in-house use perspective, I don't know, I've tried, like probably everybody else, ChatGPT draft me a policy and draft me this and draft me an agreement. And I take it on board that it's like an intern. It's like that first year student that gives you your first draft. Some of it might be right, some of it might not be right, but it's a place to start. So I think there's a general slow adoption, but it's with trepidation and caution.
I think about it, wearing my software developer hat, there's this term, a differential multiplier, right? That a tool can be an efficiency gain, but a special efficiency gain for someone who knows what they're doing. And I think that is really the role of generative AI. It's your pair programmer if you're a software developer, it's your co-counsel if you're a lawyer, but it's not replacing you, right? You need to be able to contextualize the information it's giving you. That heuristic of, well, this is an eager, book smart, but not terribly practical recent graduate is a kind of good heuristic to work with.
But debatable even if book smart, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Well, yeah. But what if it's terabytes and terabytes of garbage? I want to go back to your idea around the policy though, because I think we do need artificial intelligence policies both for our customer-facing product and for our internal tools. But who owns that policy? Is it the legal function?
I think every policy lands with legal at some point, but I think it's a joint collaborative output. And for me, particularly at Nuix, it's the engineers and legal together. We create it and we monitor it together. But I'd like to not own it, but it sits with me.
Yeah, I don't own that. I take a slightly different view. I think for us, for tech companies where, again, the engineering team is kind of the lifeblood, they will be the ones, and they were the ones for Harrison AI who came knocking first to say, hey, really would love to explore the use of Gen AI tools. GitHub Copilot is going to make me 10 times faster. I don't want to be wasting my time fixing, like doing bug fixes, et cetera, please tell me we can just use it. If I had said, nope, ban it, they're going to do it anyway. And they're going to do it anyway in a way where I have zero visibility and we have no idea whether the output code is going to end up in product or not. And that's a terrible, terrible scenario for everyone. And so that's definitely not a route that I would recommend going down. But in terms of ownership, I think it comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It depends on what you're trying to do with the tool. And there are different types of Gen AI tools depending on different types of the org. For the engineering teams, they are tools like GitHub Copilot. And the way that we're working through it is, okay, engineering team, you guys are the ones who will be using this tool. I'm not going to be the one using this tool. You tell me, what is it that you want to do with this tool? And then let's do a demo of that tool so that you can see how it actually operates. And then you will actually be able to see firsthand what the limitations are of that tool for yourself. And then let's work together where you own the document to say what it should and should not be used for. I can tell you what all the risks are. Some we can take a view on, some we really just can't. But ownership of that policy lies with the engineering team for us.
I mean, that's tricky though, because Jen and Ilona, you're both working in businesses that have available to them machine learning engineers, artificial intelligence engineers. You know, you're cutting edge technology businesses. What about, because the adoption of these tools, ChatGPT in the marketing function, for example, that's not exclusive to a technology company. What if you don't have that engineering team who can consult to legal and help you set the policy?
Well, to be honest, I've been struggling with this for the last 3 or 4 years in the sense that the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that democracies in particular do not have the governments around the world, forget democracies, governments around the world more generally do not have the trust architecture in place right now that is fit for purpose in a digital age. It is, and this is a case in point, like, whether it's emerging tech or whatever, at the moment we're talking about Gen AI, but I went to a neurotech event recently and we were talking about, most people know about brain-computer interfaces, but not many people have heard about neural dust. Wait till you get into that space. It really is, pardon the pun, mind-blowing, and it's not science fiction anymore. So, when you've got tech out here, emerging tech, and we can go political and talk about the flavour of the day, but there's all this other stuff that's happening that no one's really talking about. And government's over here, and that gap is getting so wide. What is the trust mechanism or architecture that we have right now to deal with this? And that's one of the things I'm going to be trying to work through at the university. So an idea I've floated is to get a vanguard unit in place. So wearing my tech council hat, wearing my university hat, bring the industry together with the academics, identify an area that is clearly in need of reg. They will come up together, so it's not just tech focused or academic focused. They will come up together, identify the burning issues of that tech, and then essentially create a quasi-white paper, a mini white paper for government. So instead of government coming across it in 4 years' time, it's there, they can maybe take 2 years off it. But the point is, we need to rethink the way that we work in a society to make it fit for purpose, I think.
It's more than regulation and legislation, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
It really, and again, I don't have, that vanguard unit is one piece of it, but there's so much more.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the European Union draft legislation, we might see a final draft at the end of the year, and maybe it'll be live in 2026.
Yeah, exactly. And how much is the world going to change between now and then? So
now, I think generative AI is already transforming our internal businesses. I've got my eye on the clock, right? But it's also going to transform external counsel. And Demetrio, in our keynote today, talked about the role that we can play as in-house counsel in driving change in external counsel. What do you think, directed at Jen and Ilona especially, you'll see in terms of the way external counsel's value proposition changes when they start to adopt generative AI tools, and how do you think those will drive the adoption of things like value-based pricing, which so far have really, as Demetrio said, sat at the margins of the private profession?
You want to go first?
Sure. For me, external counsel add value 2 ways. They add capacity that you don't have in your team, or they add capability that you don't have in your team. So for me, that's sort of very clearly the 2 areas. If they can use whatever tools they want to use to make it more efficient for them to make money and still deliver what I need, I reckon they can go for it. That's sort of my very easy philosophy on it.
I would put the emphasis a bit less on Gen AI tools and more on AI tools in general. Because if I had external counsel saying to me, we extensively use generative AI to provide our legal services, I'd probably pause. And I would want to know exactly what it is, what component of their legal advice chain is using the Gen AI tool, and what are you doing with it? What's the output that I'm seeing that has been fed into the machine? But AI tools being used by law firms isn't new. It's been around for a little, like it's not been around for decades, but it certainly has been around for a few years now. The former firm I worked at was Gilbert & Tobin. I was in the M&A team there, and we used AI-powered tools for DD, for contract review. That's been around for some time, and that is tremendously value-adding, not just for the law firms in lifting up, you know, the dreaded DD work that the junior lawyers have to do, but also for the end customer, because the costs are just halved. I would expect that from law firms now. That's an expectation, that you are leveraging AI tools that are available in the market to do that type of high volume work. Whether or not it should or can be Gen AI tools, I think that's a separate conversation and should be explored on a case-by-case basis depending on the output that you want.
Yeah, there's almost a microeconomic component to that, isn't there? That prices should just come down as the cost of output comes down in a market like this. Now, we started the session talking about customer service, how technology tools can improve our delivery of value, expertise, knowledge to the business from the in-house team. I want to bring that back, I told you I would, and finish off asking you this question. How do you see the use of artificial intelligence in your in-house function, and appropriately adjust that for you, Victor, to deliver value to your internal customers in the future? Maybe not today, but in the future.
Did we go first?
Sure. I apply the same discipline and lens to what I would expect of my private practice external legal advisors to my team for the business. It is incumbent on my team to be exploring AI tools that are out there that make us run faster. It just is. Whether that is in automating templates for NDAs, whether that is in speeding up mass contract reviews, things that are not going to break necessarily if you use these tools, but are going to add huge efficiencies. I think it's actually incumbent on us to explore that. So I apply the exact same lens that I would of an external counsel.
Yeah, I would. I look at it two ways. One, I think in managing your in-house team, you always need to be encouraging generational diversity. And the more younger people you tend to be hiring, they come naturally with knowing technology I've never even heard of before. And so being open to that absolutely brings it in-house, and you can actually then leverage from that. So you don't feel the pressure that you've got to learn it all yourself, because there's a way that you can bring that capability into your own team. So it's sort of a plug for that generational diversity to come through as well. And naturally that will happen, and I can still talk to them about, you know, yellow paper on a fax machine once upon a time.
Except for those keyboards. I'm not a fan of those. The really noisy tactile keyboards, oh my God, they drive me nuts.
Oh, I love them. I love the mechanical keyboard.
Actually, I had start tape when I was a lawyer, so I go back that far. With 0 seconds on the clock, I would say that whether you're a government providing services or you're a company selling goods and services, at the end of the day, it's about hyper-personalisation. It's about being proactive rather than reactive, and I think that's where the big play is. You know, rather than just being a number, you become a person, and that's if you use it properly.
Putting the person at the centre.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to give the audience an opportunity to ask maybe one question, and then if you have any more speakers, we'll be there at drinks, I'm sure. So any questions on AI, which is obviously super, super hot? Okay, we've got a question. Yeah, we've got a mic behind you.
Thank you. It's a fascinating conversation. Lawyers have been able to build expert systems, expert advisors. We talked about contract automation. they've been able to build these tools for a while. AI seems to solve perhaps this blank canvas problem, that it's actually really hard to translate your expertise and knowledge as a lawyer into rules that you can put into a system. Generative AI, though, there's this massive lure that it's going to fix that problem, but we seem to be going in circles that this is actually going to be providing advice to our stakeholders and doing the boring bits of our job. How do we break that circuit and actually be better communicators about what generative AI can and can't do, especially when it comes to accuracy in the real world?
Well, good to go. I think we missed the point that one of the most beneficial things we give as counsel is empathy and that human element when we're delivering the advice. That will never be replaced by any artificial intelligence. So I would be that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was having a discussion with a doctor recently at a function, and he was saying, "Look, this Gen AI stuff, it's just, it's just ridiculous. It's not going to work." And I said to him, "With the greatest respect, doctor, I'm sure you're on top of your game, but you have no idea right now what's happening cutting edge in New Jersey. But machine learning will. So, in the not too distant future, if not now, I would not go to a GP unless they are using some form of artificial intelligence, with them being the McCoy and the AI being the Spock at the back. You need both. If you don't have both, then quite frankly, you don't have trust."
My perspective on AI technology generally is it's not necessarily and shouldn't necessarily be seen as a threat. I see it as something that can augment existing skills and can provide efficiencies as a result. And for the legal profession specifically, I would have the same view. I don't see it as a tool that's going to replace us. I see it as a tool that's going to make us much more effective. And in the healthcare industry, that's the exact same lens that Harrison AI takes. We're not here to replace the doctors, we're here to augment their skills. The doctors around the world, not just Australia, take years, up to a decade plus, to be trained in their specialty. And there is a severe shortage of trained clinicians, and that is actually just increasing because demand is increasing. And doctors are dropping out and they're leaving the industry. What that means for all of us as current or prospective patients is not good. And these doctors, that means their time, the value of their time is increasing. Should they be spending time doing measurements or statistical analyses of tissue? I don't think so. Or should they be doing high-level analysis, patient triage and care, taking into account your entire diagnostic history, which only a human can do? I think that's where their value is. And I would apply that same analogy to legal.
I think also, the capacity to handle dynamic input and create dynamic output is exciting, and I think that is a change from expert systems. Some expert systems I see as a kind of transposition of the effort, not a reduction of it. I've seen extremely convoluted expert systems that we're now working with firms to transform. But the other thing I think about here is, and this is true whether you're in-house or we're talking more broadly, there is a great deal of legal demand that goes unmet. The Productivity Commission and the Law Council of Australia tell us that 85% of people with a legal problem never speak to a lawyer about that problem. So we serve an extremely small and privileged part of the population as a profession. But that's also true in your business as a microcosm of society. There are plenty of legal issues that are faced by your sales, marketing, engineering teams every day that are too trivial, too small, not worth the time to bother legal about. And, following from Jen's example, we're very fortunate, notwithstanding the dynamic with the reduction of GP numbers, to have a healthcare system that allows almost everyone to access a general practitioner when they need one. But we don't have that for law. And I would love to see, will it ever be as good as speaking to a solicitor? No, but I would love to see a democratisation of legal information powered by AI.
Yeah, I'm just really curious about this because I remember when I was growing up, I thought that, space travel would become completely ubiquitous and there would be flying cars and everything would be of a particular style, that has not transpired. Do you think there'll be another AI winter when some of the expectations that we have set for AI start to fall, like the engine falls short, and we start to think, well, that was all a bit of a to-do. Let's move on, and there might be a pause for a bit before the next spurt.
Were you referencing the Jetsons?
I was referencing the Jetsons. I was, it astounds me that we're going back to the moon, and congratulating ourselves for it. I'm just wondering whether or not you guys foresee another pause in the AI trajectory, or we've gone too far now. It's game on.
There is in tech theory, for lack of better words, I think if I remember the term correctly, Amara's law or the hype cycle, that talks to just new technology when it's introduced to society. There's generally a phase where everyone's super excited, funding pours in, the projections for what the tech is going to achieve is astronomical. And then reality kind of sets in, the constraints of the relevant technology become evident, funding gets withdrawn, and then there's a kind of a petering out of excitement. That certainly did apply to AI and did kind of give rise to the AI winter in the 70s. There was also kind of a mini AI winter that followed that about a decade and a half later too. So I wouldn't be surprised if it happened again, particularly with respect to Gen AI, because right now the predictions that you're seeing for generative AI are wild and everyone is talking about it like it's going to end the world tomorrow. So I expect some of that hype to start to wear off soon. Whether it's going to result in an AI winter, I don't know, but is it foreseeable? Is something that could happen? Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I think that one of my favourite quotes in AI came from Professor Bartlett, I think it was, and he said something to the effect that one of the greatest failings of humanity is that we don't appreciate the exponential function. It's so true, and AI is really in that lane. And even if 10% of the hype is made good, that is profound change. Like some of the stuff you saw in the Jetsons, we've got stuff today that even the Jetsons couldn't imagine. Sure, we're going to be going to Mars in the next decade or thereabouts and having another visit to the moon, but there is so much. Like, imagine, we haven't even touched upon genomics, CRISPR-Cas9, we haven't touched upon connectomics. All of these are basically at their core databases. You put just a little bit of dumb AI on top of it and you change humanity. Now, again, is it hyperbole? Maybe. But again, you get 10% of what that exaggeration is and profound changes in the next decade or two.
Thank you so much. I have to stop there, but please give our speakers a big round of applause. That was fantastic on AI. Thank you to David, Victor, Ilona, and Jen. That was fantastic. Our last panel of the day, our panelists have had a fantastic idea. Why don't we all go grab a drink and then come back to our chairs? I think we're going to need some liquid courage to get through it. So just grab a drink. The bar's right behind this wall, and then come back to your chairs, and then we can kick that one off.
Great to see you. Yeah. You know what's funny? I wanted to say this to everybody, but I didn't want to embarrass you. Somebody at the back said, "How did you get Tom Cruise?" And I was like, "No, wait. I didn't get Tom Cruise. That's Victor Dominello." He's like, "Wait, how did you get Victor Dominello to the movie?" Good job. No, but. No, that was fantastic. I mean, there's so much. I didn't understand the last 3 words you said. You said you put dumb AI on these 3 things and you'll change humanity. What were those 3 things? Like medical?
Chronic timing. So chronic timing is basically having genomics is having the journey.
Okay.
And we're just about to start. Yeah, I really
what's the little dumb?
Yeah, no worries.
Just have a seat and then we can start the last panel and then we can go to drinks properly and then... All right. Okay, so without further ado, our next and final panel is how to be a more effective GC. So let's please welcome our speakers to the stage with a big round of applause, please.
Oh, yeah. I know we've got 3. Yeah, we've got 3.
Excellent. I think we're still looking for one speaker. Neil? Neil? Are you still at the bar?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Excellent. So, can I just introduce our speakers, please? So our moderator today is Joe N. Lowe, who's a partner at Ashurst. And our panelists are Gihan Wijaratne, who's the head of legal and company secretary for Pacific at Ingenico. Louise Fitzpatrick, who's the general counsel and company secretary for Bindari Food Group. And then finally, we've got Neil Sher, who's the general counsel for Australia and New Zealand at JD Sports. Thank you so much, and Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Rowan. So we, in preparing for today's session, we thought one of the key themes coming out of the discussion was that GCs nowadays are required to deal with a myriad of matters that are both legal and non-legal, and under increasing cost pressures. So in today's discussion,
we thought it would be good to highlight how some of that plays out in different areas, and to bring that point home, and just to talk about, what are the tips that our speakers have for managing balancing so many balls in the air effectively, and from day-to-day practical tips to sort of overarching policy initiatives. So the three main areas that we were going to cover today, in order to bring that out, is firstly how does the legal function and the business of our panelists sit alongside broader economic developments. Then we'll cover how they fit within their organisation, the legal function. What are the expectations of the legal function? How is decision making effectively propelled through the organisation? And then lastly, but certainly not least, how they manage their own legal team, and the people that they see day to day and work together with to deliver certain outcomes. So without further ado, I'll start with the first one, and I throw this question out to Louise here in the middle, to sort of have a little chat about, what it is that you think the expectations of GCs today is different to, say, maybe 10 years ago, and that's sort of looking back, but also looking forward. How do you see it evolving in the future as a result of recent developments?
I think it's changed in a couple of ways, and it's actually a very good question, because it's been just over 10 years since I did move into an in-house role. So, and I do remember when I was looking to move in-house, my private practice colleague said to me at that time, "Why would you do that? You're just going to end up spending all your days doing boring, grunt work, and all the exciting work's going to go to the external firms." And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, obviously there's that sort of depth of experience that you still need to go to external firms for sometimes, but the role of the legal function has really grown in complexity and breadth and responsibility. And as an example, I've recently, taken on the risk and sustainability functions, and I think it's a real recognition. And I'm in an agri-food business, so those functions are quite big. Like we do face a lot of risks. We do face huge sustainability issues, and I think there's a growing recognition of the sort of ways of thinking, the unique position that general counsels can play in an organisation, and business valuing that. And I think the other way it's changed is that 10 years ago there was probably more of a focus on in-house counsel, being that independent legal function. Like, I can't give you advice on that, that's a commercial decision, and I'm just here to provide my independent legal advice, and you do with that what you will. And I think nowadays that's quite unrealistic. There's an expectation that you're going to be there providing strategic direction, making commercial decisions, and that's sort of that added value that general counsel are bringing. And I think that's where the effectiveness comes in.
That's exactly what I'm hearing a lot from my clients. An M&A lawyer in my day-to-day role, and exactly as Louise has put it, it is about being part of the business and part of the team now. You're not this sort of rubber stamping function, and one element of that is very much the responsibilities, and on a good day and on a bad day, the burdens of being the legal function within an organisation. It would be interesting to hear, Neil, what you have to say about that, coming from a very different organisation. How have you experienced that evolution in your role, in your business?
Sure. So when I first joined JD Sports, it was really to roll out their national retail stores across Australia, and we've gone into New Zealand. From there, it very quickly grew into a much broader role, dealing with things like terms of trade, supply agreements, cybersecurity even comes up, employment relations, intellectual property matters. The list goes on, and so to be able to be across, I guess, so many different areas, it's about getting to sit down with the business and its key decision makers and learn their daily work and what's driving them and what pitfalls they may have, and seeing how we can assist to really make the ride a little bit smoother. And sometimes it can be even in matters that are completely non-legal in a sense. Recently we had a customer, for example, call our New Zealand business, the customer services team, and asked for their last names, which was completely ridiculous. And just going from all the matters that are legal and non-legal, suddenly I found myself sitting down with the customer service team and talking with this customer, explaining why we couldn't give out our customer service team members' last names. So it's just bizarre what sort of things you'll come across there, but exciting.
Anything to add on that, Gihan?
Yeah, the many hats of the GC. So I think we touched on this earlier today about advising through not only the legal lens, there's the strategic lens, there's the value lens. So this was quite a big shift for me, at least, from going from private practice to in-house. Is you're not only advising through the legal lens, you're advising through a whole range of other things, and that's how you really unlock value in the legal team. So there's an example I can give. So in terms of, we had a remediation project, and the legal outcome would have resulted in an amount to the counterparties, but advising through our values would have actually resulted in a higher amount, and it was a great result for both the counterparties but also the business. And we say that because it really showed, protects some reputation. It also is a factor in retaining top talent, and this is why people want to work when you advise through your values. We also touched on previously in the chat today that it can be weaponized. I had a salesperson weaponize one of our mission statements, which is "make possible." They were like, "Well, make this possible," and I said, "Well, okay, it's not one of our values. It's a mission statement, but we have trust and care as well. So also, be careful about that. But I think if you retain that integrity, you'll go far."
That is a really good point. So I'm going to break a little bit from tradition, and instead of waiting for the halfway mark, I'm just going to throw it to the audience to see if you have any thoughts on what has been said by our panelists, or any questions. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a mic behind you.
Thank you. I'm a GC, and I think personally there's an inherent tension between being a business partner and making commercial, pragmatic decisions for the business, and the business making decisions on risk, especially significant material risk. And I think that is an inherent tension that, I've got my own way of dealing with it, but I'm interested to hear how you deal with it.
I'm happy to take this one. So I think two things here. Obviously, like the G in ESG, the governance is really important to get that partition and that risk element there. I'd go a bit further and say, like, if you're able to come up with a really effective legal strategy where you can effectively show, this is how the business will use the legal team or the law in driving a business goal. You've got this like mesh and sort of this synchronicity between the legal team and pushing through and driving these business goals. So then as a result, the risk tension between business and legal and other parts of the business, they'll hopefully just be a lot more smoother if you're able to get to that stage.
I might add to that. For my view on my role within the organisation has always been about not being a handbrake and to the business vision ultimately. And it's about being that strategic partner. And another, at the risk of using an overused cliche, I basically consider myself a taxi driver in a sense, in that I can get you from A to B and we'll navigate the route, but I'll avoid the bumps as best as possible. So it's about identifying the risks for them and allowing them the freedom to make those decisions, and just equipping them with the understanding that the consequences of each of those. But at the end of the day, it's a commercial driver, and you're there to facilitate their decision making. So that's very much how I see my role in different constraints with commercial versus legal. It's about being there with them for a common goal.
I'll add to it. I think the relationship building is really important in that, so that it's not that you've come in at the last minute as the person to say, no, that's too risky, or there are issues with that. It's being able to help drive the strategy from the beginning so as to minimise the risk from the beginning. And then in that way, it's not that, as Neil said, you're coming in as a handbrake, but that you've helped to steer the business in the right direction from the beginning. And I think that's where access and trust is really important. And I think that as well, it sounds a bit sneaky, but it's kind of, I think you can do it in a way that the business doesn't say, oh, you're stopping me from doing it. It's actually bringing them on the journey and helping them make that decision as well.
Thank you, everyone. Our panelists are from very diverse organisations, and I think what's really resonating from their feedback is to your point about the tensions. It's about minimising that tension, and they've just suggested some ways in which you can do that. But certainly, in my experience, that tension, as you mentioned, can't be totally eradicated. But there is a lot of, I would say, bulk majority of cases that tension is unnecessary or is counterproductive. And so minimising it in the ways that our panellists have suggested, being there at the beginning, being a facilitator, understanding the broader commercial objectives and how you fit into it is a great way of doing that. And then for the minority of cases where that tension still exists, I think it's a good thing. Actually, tension in of itself plays a function, because if everybody in an organisation, whether it's a law firm or a business, sort of plays to the same tune and says the same thing and views a problem in the same way, then there is a monotony about that. Innovation and progress and a lot of other things don't happen. So that friction or tension can be harnessed to produce very creative and sometimes quite innovative solutions to particular situations. So, I suppose the art for in-house counsel is identifying that small number of cases where that tension is productive and can be used constructively, and where most of the time it's just inefficient. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this section by throwing a broad question out to all our panelists about what you think effectively is the one single, if you had to choose, no top 10 or top 5, just the one biggest challenge facing you as a GC as a result of current global development. So whether that's, high inflation and the looming recession, ESG factors, the war in Ukraine, if you want to go that way, supply chain issues, and more importantly, how have you been dealing with that? How have you been going about managing it?
Yeah, happy to start. The supply chain issues have been, so the thing of the last 2-3 years, and Ingenico hasn't been. Has definitely been impacted by that. So we're a hardware, software and services business in the payment ecosystem, and our hardware definitely gets affected by supply chain issues. And what I've found is being effective is actually not going to the contract, not having disputes with our carriers, and then as well as trying to rely on force majeure clauses and getting into the legal territory, but actually having business partnering with the various departments, having the conversations and giving them the tools to manage these supply chain issues if and when they arise. And that's probably been the biggest issue that I've come across.
Yeah, for me, working in an agribusiness, I've been totally blown away by the impact that things have from around the world. And almost on a daily basis, our CEO sends emails around about, whether it's raining in the US or what the cows are doing in Brazil or who Penny Wong's talking to. I personally find that completely fascinating, and it keeps me engaged and interested and makes me understand what's driving the business, and that in turn helps with understanding strategic vision and being able to provide useful legal advice. So yeah, I mean, I think it's those complexities, like, you know, the world's shrinking in some ways, with all of those impacts being felt, and it's just, it just feels like, you know, on a daily basis, we're having to grapple with these things that are happening around on the other side of the world. So it makes for interesting times.
In retail, we've certainly had an interesting few years, particularly around COVID and obviously the issues that all that brought to supply chain, to our retail store network. At the time, back in 2020, there were probably about 34 stores. Now we're over 50 plus. And so the biggest issue that we've really had to deal with is risk mitigation, in the sense that in not only a potentially downturn in economy, and I don't want to use the R word, but some would say we're already there, we're certainly going to start facing a lot more headwinds in the retail space. And so it's about us knowing what those risks are and where our rights, if we've been successful in managing those from a leasing perspective, and our liabilities. If sales, for example, don't hit targets, then have we got the necessary early termination rights, if that's the case? So sitting with the property teams and our supply partners, brands, to understand how do we renegotiate, or if the time comes, need to implement a provision of our agreements to protect the business.
Thank you, everybody. So basically, their roles as GCs require them to also be economists and political scientists. So that seems, that's certainly my key takeaway from that. The second section or second theme we were hoping to cover is, you know, how the GC function and our panelists as leaders of that work with the broader business organisation and in a management sense. So, you know, reporting lines, communication, and sort of ensuring that, I guess, legal is heard and at the right times and in the right places. So to start us off, I think in order to actually achieve or to establish a strong identity within an organisation for the legal function, one does need to have a legal strategy. And I would be interested, Gihan, to hear about what you think makes an effective legal strategy.
Yeah. So there's this story about Walt Disney. So I'll just touch on this, and it kind of inspired me, or at least sort of influenced the way I've done our legal strategy at Ingenico. So Walt Disney, back in the 50s, 60s, they had an expiring media copyright and licenses. So expiring media copyright. So they decided to transfer the value of that intellectual property to a whole range of trademarks with names, characters, images. And what that did, so this is the legal strategy of Walt Disney, that it effectively turned their intellectual property into a regime that didn't have an expiring deadline, and it also created this massive value for the business through merchandising, and then it's a huge business revenue for them. And so with Ingenico, we are going through this transformational journey, going from this traditionally known as a hardware business to software and services. And through that journey, where the legal team's really been really effective with business partnering here and creating a legal strategy where we're unlocking a lot of intellectual property value here in order to actually shift from this hardware to solutions and services business. So Apple, Samsung, they've all gone through this journey. We're probably a little bit late, but we're still going through it, and we'll get there. But actually understanding how the legal team can come up with an effective legal strategy which meshes with the business goals is vital, and that's sort of what I've seen as key to legal department success.
That's fantastic. On that point of meshing, Neil, you know, if you want to pick up and you know, meshing, aligning, you know, how do you go about aligning legal with the rest of the business?
So for me, I would say that meshing legal with the business is to literally embed yourself into the decision-making level. So when I joined the business, it was a greenfield role, and people were probably not necessarily mistrusting of lawyers, but they had really never come across lawyers in that retail space. And so for me, it was about building relationships and identifying key stakeholders or people in the business that were at the either heads of department or making decisions that affected the business. And so it was really just a matter of walking up to our very open plan office and introducing myself and saying, here's the things that I can help you with, and trying to understand their role and how they function within their business. So trying very early on to establish a trust arrangement. So one of the things around legal strategy, having a formalized document, I've kind of gone with a bit more of an organic approach with my way of introducing it into the business, to the point now where our senior leadership team will come to me on certain matters. It might even just be in the kitchen, just to say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and whether we're introducing a new customer loyalty program, and they'll proactively come to me and involve me in that decision and that process, and just trying, even our marketing team, which is amazing. It's incredible at the level of questions that I sometimes get, and I'm like, wow, you really do care about the compliance and those sorts of things. So I think it's about maintaining strong relationships and being incredibly visible. So that's how I try and mesh the legal function with the business, by really being there and approachable.
Wise words, Neil. But I do suspect that a lot of it is also your personal people skills coming into play to bring that to fruition. So I think picking up on your point and how critical stakeholders are in managing your relationship as a legal function with them. It'd be lovely to hear from Louise what your view is on managing that relationship, and who you consider your main stakeholders to be, actually.
Yeah, so look, I think in terms of the legal strategy, we're about to set our FY24 strategy, and every 4 to 6 weeks we have senior executive days where we get together and align again, like realign on strategy and make sure that we're going back to it. And so I'm lucky enough that I'm heavily involved in that process, and so whilst the legal function, our strategy and our priorities are driven by the company's strategy, I then also have input into that. So I think that is a really good reflection on the sort of relationship that is able to bring out, the best in the legal function, and the legal function can assist the company in the best way. And in terms of stakeholders, I'd say, the board and management, but anyone in the business really, that's sort of one of those roles. I'm sure a lot of you can sympathise where anyone can come to you, and I think that is really good. I don't really believe in, hierarchies and only the heads of whatever can come to you. I think that you learn so much from the business, from that accessibility, both ways, you being able to access anyone and anyone being able to access you. And ultimately, as Neil and Gihan has said, it's that trust. And so, what's that saying about if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, has the tree really fallen? You can give the best advice you've ever written, and it could be, completely aligned to the business, and, but if you don't have the ear of the business, or no one is willing to listen to it, that advice is completely useless. And in fact, it could be more dangerous, because it shows a culture of people not listening to the legal team. So I think, once you build that trust, and you have those relationships, that's when the effective legal advice can be given, and then you're understanding the business so that your advice is effective. And then that's when you can have those challenging conversations, and we spoke about those tensions before. That's the environment in which those challenging conversations can be had and can be heard, because you've built that trust and you're understanding the business and what their drivers are.
Yeah, building on that, so how to build trust, I've got like another example here. So there's this book called The First 90 Days, and it talks about when you go enter a new business, what you should be sort of looking to do. And one of them says, yep, hit secure early wins. But another one is, it talks about you'll be a net consumer for a while, and until you're a net contributor. But if you sort of go too early to be a net contributor, you'll go too shallow, and you probably won't hit the levels that you want to hit. So if you go deep, you sit in those meetings that you don't really want to go to. You sit in sales meetings, you sit in the R&D function meetings, and you're learning. You build that trust. You go deep. You speak their language. You'll J-curve your way out, and you'll sort of hit the pinnacles and height of trying to be the most effective as you can. So yeah.
I also might just add one more point, and that is about the delivery of the legal product that you offer to the business. And part of the building of trust and approachability is also tailoring that advice or that opinion to suit the audience. So I know now after 5 years almost of working very closely with my CFO that he won't really take my advice unless it's in an Excel spreadsheet. And it took me a few years to get that, pretty much. Whereas our people team, HR, they like PowerPoints. And so I try and tailor the language and the delivery to suit the way that they work, and that they can use that information and perhaps share it with their team. So my preference is still very much for long-winded emails, but I've tried to cut that down.
So lots of practical, helpful tips there from our panelists. And I might open it now to the audience to see if you have any further questions of our panelists on this area, particularly if you also want some practical tips.
Yeah. Thanks to the panel members. That was a great discussion. I've just got a question about BC. To what extent have members of the panel implemented any kind of technology or measurements of value, and if not, to what extent is that something that should be on the horizon?
Happy to take this one. So when I joined in Genico, it was, again, Greenfield's role, but they've been operating in Australia for about 40 years. So it was just amazing that they didn't have a legal function then. And so from the ground up, I was told earlier on by another GC who I connected with, who had similar reporting lines to me. So aligned to the group GC in France, but aligned to this local CEO, and she recommended, look, use spreadsheets, get data. That's what will be able to leverage your discussions in order for headcount and investment. And luckily, I didn't have to deal with spreadsheets. I was able to automate some data and actually capture what we're doing, what's the strategic value of our matters, capture a lot of data points that we can actually use to leverage and have these discussions that will sort of grow the legal function and actually change the perception of what we are. So not a cost center, not a handbrake to happiness, not a the Department of Reading and Writing, where we're actually an enabler where there's a lot of value here, and depending on your organization the value will be different, but highly recommend leveraging the data that you can grab and do it in a really sophisticated way so you can have those meaningful discussions.
Oh, sure. So to the horror of many in-house lawyers, when I joined JD Sports, I retained the 6-minute billable time recording. And you can take the boy out of the law firm, but you can't take the law firm out of the boy. But what it did allow me to see was very clearly where I was spending my time. And so I could see there were areas of the business that needed more support than others. And I wondered whether that was a product of two things. Either they were just winging it, or there was low legal risk, or they just didn't require it. So what I did was early on establish, when you talk about automation and technology, it's really, we're still at the phase of trying to work out how to implement that. We've got our UK parent company that loves to dictate how we introduce technology into the business. So there's certain challenges there, but at least from setting the teams up for success by providing tools, by providing a pro forma template where possible, and at least addressing the time taken to do tasks, and putting the control back to them. That's where I've sort of benchmarked a level of success, is to say, if you don't need me, that's great, but at the same time I worry that there's a lot of things that I don't know about, so I do check in. But absolutely, it's still a very manual process, and I think there's room to grow for technology implemented into the business.
Do you want to? No. Oh, okay.
You brought up reporting. You actually kind of stole my question, but I actually came up with another one. With sort of using reporting, you can kind of use it to grow your team and that sort of stuff. So I'm interested to know It sounds like we're still sort of in-house, just sort of solo roles. Like, what's your sort of vision? Like, what are you going to use that data for to sort of grow the team? Is there sort of, you know, ways that you can kind of grow that? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so it was already able to grow the team and get headcount and pushing for more and getting it chopped down. But it's a legal tech we've talked about. So, and then also really like executing on the strategy. So we have a legal strategy. We want to execute on it. We need investment in order to do that. This data is key in order to have those discussions to get the investment to execute it on. So it's a whole range of things in terms of headcount. There's investment on the strategy and growing the team. So that's in a nutshell. Yeah, that's that.
And that provides a very nice segue into the next theme. So I think from this conversation, we've also learnt that our panelists have taken a crash course in management and could probably also join a management consultant firm. But in the next area, we're really going to test their views on sort of people management, EQ, and all of that. Headcount is one thing. Getting a team in the door is another. Is something which data obviously helps you to do. But once you get the team in the door, what is the best way to harness the talent of your team? How do you get them to work together with you to fulfill your legal objectives and to fit in also with the rest of the organisation? And I think one of the biggest certainly challenges I'm facing as a private practitioner with my team these days is that, and not to reveal my age, but there are a lot more expectations about work-life balance. A lot more than when I started out working in the legal industry. You kind of just, no weekends, okay. No sleep, okay. You pay me. 20 years of this, okay. Nowadays, you're asking, I get somebody who's like, oh, I think this might require you to stay past 6, and they're like, oh, my mental health is very badly affected. What are you going to do about it? So my question to the panelists here is, how do you think, concerns around work-life balance and some of those sort of related topics impacts your ability to be an effective GC and to deliver to the rest of your organisation?
Look, I think if COVID and the Great Resignation has taught us anything, it's that companies need to care for their people as a baseline. And what you're saying, Joanne, it's just not sustainable to expect people to work like that. And what it looks like is different for everyone. I need to travel every 4 to 6 weeks, for these senior exec days on different sites, and those weeks are really tough for my family unit. I've got 3 kids under 8. But on the flip side, on the weeks that I'm not travelling, I have full autonomy and flexibility to adjust my days and whether I come into the office based on what my family needs. And I really value that, and I feel that that's the business placing trust in me and valuing me. To manage my workload and to create the sort of, work style that suits me. I think it's, work-life balance, it just kind of implies a nicely balanced, seesaw that's, evenly keeled. My life is way more hectic than that. It's like, seesawing up and down. And certainly what it looks like is different for everyone, but I think fundamentally it's very unrealistic to expect the best out of someone, the most effective work out of someone, if you're not caring about that person as more than the work that they can provide, and that's just a fundamental principle. If you want to have an effective legal team, it's allowing that sort of scope and trust. And again, it comes down to trust.
No, I absolutely agree. And certainly in my role, I find the one thing that works very effectively is in empowering my team so that they feel confident that they have what they need to actually deliver to my expectations and the expectations of the broader business. So on that point, Neil, being in-house and not necessarily having access to the sort of legal and other sort of resources that, say, you would have normally in a private practice environment, how do you go about ensuring that you and your team are well informed of recent developments?
Okay. firstly, can I just address the previous question? And it's perhaps a bit of a disclaimer, because when you talk about work-life balance, and I'll come to your second question, my wife and I, we welcomed our second child, and I'm currently on 3 hours sleep, pretty much. 7 weeks old, so it's a crazy time. So that being one element, work fortunately in an in-house capacity can offer that flexibility, which is great to be able to adjust your day. But coming back to your question. I'm very fortunate that we've got a great industry body, the Australian Retail Association. There's also the National Retail Association, and there's a lot of resource out there from law firms providing briefs and newsletters. So I would suspect I'm subscribed to over 100. It's a great way to get a short snippet of insight into regulatory change or new developments, but even just reading the news can alert you to some pretty concerning circumstances affecting other players, and you just quietly hope that you don't suddenly find yourself in the news. But it's about taking that information, working with it very quickly to provide something that is useful to the team. In my case, the senior leadership team, I'll fire up a quick email, really just high-level information, and then from there can be deeper dive into how we can implement different strategy into our business, whether it's a matter of updating our policy or contracts. So that's we leverage a lot of our great networks within the industry to help us be at the front of change.
That's fantastic. Does anyone from the audience have any questions on this particular point for the panelists?
Yeah, I think given the time, we'll allow maybe one question, and then we can close it out and go to the bar. Any questions? How to be more effective GC? I think our speakers have done a fantastic job covering most of the key points. Excellent.
Okay, all right. So we don't want to stand between you and the booze. So I think I'll just throw this just to the panelists, this last question, so that you have something to take away with you for the evening, which is, if you could provide one key piece of advice or takeaway for everybody in this room, you personally, what would that be? It could be anything from, is it true that the grass is greener on the in-house side? Please.
Absolutely. No, but one key takeaway is develop your legal strategy and mesh it with the business goals. You'll unlock a lot of value in the legal department, and a lot of the time we see in a lot of businesses, the legal departments, down here, the rest of the business, sales, they're up there. So you really actually then develop this strong business partnering and add a lot of value to the organisation, as well as elevate the legal department as a peer rather than just a cost centre.
My key takeaway word is opportunities. I just think, the legal function is what you make it. It's such a malleable thing. It means different things for different organisations, and there's a lot of scope to make of it what you will. There's also opportunities to go beyond the legal if that's what you're interested in, or if you're not, to develop into areas like AI or using legal tech or, whatever it is that you are interested in. I think there's so much scope and opportunity, increasingly so as the legal function gets, more respect and responsibility from business functions. I think it's a huge, opportunity. And what are they calling it? The era of the in-house counsel, if there is such a thing.
And my key takeaway would be to learn, and that's to learn the business from every part of it. There's what it does well, what it doesn't do well. Get to know the people that are making decisions, and to essentially work out ways that you can help drive what their end goal is, which should be your same end goal. And in JD Sports' case, it would be to sell more shoes. So,
wonderful. Thank you so much. Round of applause for our panelists, everybody.
Thank you to Joe, Neil, Louise, and Gehan. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, the bar is just around the corner. So let's go. There's canapes on the tables, there's booze at the bar, and there's glow sticks as well, which we'll be handing out. So let's